welcome to the simplicity of happiness when more is too much. This podcast offers tips and techniques for a better life.
And before we start with another episode of the Simplicity of Happiness podcast, I would like to remind you that you can find out all about me and my thoughts on simplicityofhappiness.com, as well as Patreon, where I am providing extra content for all of you who support me and the education of children in Africa. And now relax and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Simplicity of Happiness podcast. Today again with a special guest, and I'm a bit honored. My guest is Martin Oetting today. Hello, Martin.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Martin was introduced to me now almost 10 years ago, and he did his PhD at a business school that I used to work back then, and he was introduced to me as Flo. Maybe that's one of the smartest person you'll ever meet. So I was scared right from the beginning.
Now I'm scared.
Yes, you better be. And then we met a couple of times, and there were always some very, very interesting facts about Martin. On the one hand, that he founded a viral marketing company, Trend, that I knew from, somebody else who recommended me to them, and I got products from them, so I already knew the company. Then he had a very cool old motorbike, and then he was the first person I ever met to switch to an electric e-bike. And while I was still thinking about electromobility, Martin wrote an article about Tesla driving, and it was just beautiful written. And then next time he caught my attention was when he shifted from Trend to, how shall I put this? Political engagement. And he founded something like Vollehalle in Berlin. And I have never been there because I don't live in Berlin anymore. But it seemed to be some kind of political entertainment. And from that moment on, I thought, sometime I have to talk to Martin about this. And now I saw a video of you, which I thought was so funny, with that little bird and the whiny man. I might put a link in the description as well. And I texted you whether we can't have a meaningful conversation. And now there's one more thing that you, Martin, after I asked you, you said, we can talk, but I think coaches like you and talking about happiness and simplicity is putting all of the responsibility to the people, and this is not the solution to our crisis. We need to change the system so that we have a system that is honoring the people, so we don't need anybody talking about the simplicity of happiness. And I was thrilled. I was like, okay, we don't have to think about any topic. Let's jump in there. What do you mean by that?
Well, allow me to first make two small corrections of what you said.
Of course.
The first one is, I think, is a misconception that at least I feel that I'm intelligent. I often feel like I'm behind everyone else. I'm oftentimes, 10 years behind other people with certain things. I'm often woefully slow with stuff. So I'm not so sure about your claim or that other person's claim that I was intelligent.
It was your professor's claim.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm trying to catch up. And the other thing is, I did not found trnd. That's how we pronounce the name of the company. But I joined very early. It had been founded about a year before by other people. Okay. But I joined very early. But, I just want to sort of clarify the facts. Coming to your question, the path to sort of political work and political thinking for me has been short and intense. It was all started really. I wasn't as political as I should have been most of my life. I come from a political family, but I myself was very passive when it comes to political things. But the election in the United States of America in 2016 changed all that. When Donald Trump got elected, I had left the company a few months earlier, and I had no escape. I could not go back to work and say, well, I'm going to think about Donald Trump in the evening or maybe on the weekend. I didn't have anything to do, so the problem was right there. So that's how my political path basically really began. And what I was saying to you in our little text exchange is something I've understood through the people I've been following and working with in the past years, and it's that our current design for the economy, our current design for economic activity, our current design for business is such that everyone is fighting harder than they should be, really. You know, professionals, hardworking people in offices, but also the people who, you know, do care work, who do cleaning work. Everyone really is taxed over the limit. Everyone is working harder than they should be. Now, is that necessary? Is the question. You know, does it need to be like this? And if you stay within the logic of the system, and you have a person who has a 70-hour work week, and they're burnt out and they don't know how to carry on, you start teaching them things they need to hear to cope with the world they live in better. You know, you might say to them, look, you could design your life in a slightly different way, and hopefully manage better and have a simpler life and a happier life and so forth. But then you stay within the system and you don't ask the overriding question, do so many people have to suffer so much? And I think we've come to a point where we realize too many people suffer too much. And not only that, the planet suffers too much. Everybody is suffering. From the bees that are dying out to the people who come to you for help, for simplicity and happiness. If everybody on the planet is suffering, then we can't just tell each other, dude, solve the problem in your own life. But we have to look at the bigger picture and say, look, man, shit is designed the wrong way. Yeah. And that's what I was basically referring to.
Yeah, and that is why I like talking to you, because we completely agree so far. Well, before I rant on with my opinions on things, what do you think is the solution? Well, let me put this a little bit more complicated. What is the overall solution, especially with those people who are numbing themselves? May it be through entertainment, may it be through partying, may it be through overworking, and they don't step up with a clear vision of how they want the world to look like. What is your idea about this?
I think when it comes to describing life and a desirable life, a meaningful life, I'm sure we will agree on most things. I think a simple life, a life where we pursue things for their own value, for their own meaning, is a desirable life, and it's not helpful to just want to buy more things or to own the bigger car and all that kind of stuff. So I think if we both sat down and were to write a list of 5 points that make a good life, we'd probably write very similar lists. The problem is that if we advocate this type of life in the system that we have, very few people will be able to have it.
Yes.
And I think it's only fair to want everyone to have it, a meaningful life. And I think that's why, so, you know, your work, I would assume, is geared towards professionals with demanding white-collar intellectual jobs. And they are the ones who can probably, by redesigning their lives in certain ways, come much closer to that ideal. They are not coming close to that ideal now because they've been taught that competing, running faster than everyone else, having more than everyone else, showing off their car at the gathering and showing that they've got the bigger car now, all that's a good life. And they need reminding by maybe someone like yourself that it isn't really, because that never ends. That's a race that you can't win, and it's a race that never stops. But what about the person who is having to work at the supermarket for I don't know how many hours a day, and then that job doesn't pay enough for the family, so they have another job that they do in the evenings or on weekends? I'm not sure they can follow the path as simply, but they need to have access to the happy life just as much as the other person. So if you're struggling to make ends meet, if you're struggling to feel part of the society that we have, and that's your second stress. The first stress is life is just so fucking hard. And then the second stress is you still feel like society treats you badly. You don't get respected for being on the front line of the COVID disease by sitting at the supermarket cashier's desk. You don't get that respect for that. So you have these two types of stress. Life is so hard to make ends meet, and then you don't get the respect. In that context, if someone said to you, well, you have to redesign your life for simplicity and happiness, that person's probably not going to be very happy about that piece of advice, And I think that's my point. My point is that the advice we give or the solutions we work for, they need to work for everyone. Only then are we being, I think, responsible in our understanding of what isn't working.
Yes. I think well, a lot of my personal philosophy is going back to the Club of Rome, where there is I never understood why there always have to be growth. Because if I have everything, what shall I keep growing? And I didn't understand that a company has to make more money each year. Because if you're making enough money to have a profit, to finance everything, to pay good salaries to everybody, why do I need to make more money next year? I personally didn't get this. What I realized at one point is that I was living my personal life the same way. I always wanted to have more. And when I discovered that more of what I don't need in the first place will never be enough. And so far it doesn't matter who I talk to, whether it be farm people or students or white or blue collar workers. Most of them think they need to have more of everything, instead of asking themselves, what do I really need and what is that I really want? And I think if you're coming back to that very personal definition of what is enough for me, then I can step forward and say, this is the political system that I want to live in. This is what the society that I want to be part of. And who is holding the power at the moment? It's not the underprivileged woman with 5 children who's trying to make ends meet. It's the white-collar workers who have enough money. And my idea about all of this is taking away the excuse for them that they can say, well, I'm just playing by the rules, this is the system. I want to ask them, what is it? Who is it that you want to be in that system? And how do you want to change the system? And I think if you start by yourself and realizing that you could use some more of freedom, love, happiness, caring, and less of the struggle, you could ask for the same for other people. May it be migrants, may it be underprivileged people. What is your idea about the ideal society? How would you implement the fairness?
let me return first to what you just said. I think, of course, it's meaningful to help people realize what happiness is, or what happiness can be. I happened to find only a few days ago, my girlfriend sent it to me actually, I found a text by Oscar Wilde that is incredible. And I did not know that Oscar Wilde was basically a socialist. The text has the title, The Soul of Man Under Socialism. Now, it's an unfortunate title because when Oscar Wilde wrote the text, socialism didn't mean what it means to us now as a word. When we hear socialism today, we hear, the horrible past of the Soviet bloc and the many things that happened that were outrageous and harmful and horrendous. But if you try to forget for a moment the connotation that socialism has as a word, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. He talks about socialism only being meaningful when it goes hand in hand with individualism. And what he says is we can only be individuals when we stop bothering with what we own, with property, with the things that we have. And he's describing a society that is exactly like the society that we have today. At his time, he's describing a society where people are what they own, what they can show, what they have, what they've accumulated. And he says the only people who can actually be themselves truly are the ones who do not think about property because they don't have to. They have enough that they don't need to think about it. But we need everyone in the world to be able to live like that. And it's interesting that this links directly to John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist who was so dominant in Europe in the first half of the last century, who once said, I think in the 30s, he said that around the year 2030, I think, everything will be so automatized and mechanized that humans will only need to work, I think, 15 hours a week. He said this in 2030, in 1930, so I guess he was making a prediction for 100 years down the line. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't see any development coming where large shares of the population can make do with working 15 hours a week. But he thought that if the progress in the economy keeps going on the way it has, that will be possible. And that means that people can become the exact individuals that Oscar Wilde, decades earlier spoke about. Namely, people who have the time to use their minds to make art, to be social, to think thoughts, to explore the world, to appreciate nature, to just have a walk in the park, all of those things, and to be truly concerned with being the best versions of themselves that they can be. And I think the problem is that if we return now to your idea about growth, and I am making a documentary film about two people who fight against our growth obsession. That's my biggest project. That's the documentary I'm currently working on. And I think if the economic system is designed in a way that growth is necessary, we will not be able to achieve this type of objective for a large share of people, for the simple reason that any government, any institution that wants to do a proper job is nowadays measured by the growth of the economy. Now, if they want to grow an economy that's incredibly well developed, like the German economy that we both are familiar with, if we want to keep growing this economy, we will start doing things that seem insane to people. A public park doesn't grow the economy. If you have a big public park in the city, people can walk there without spending money. But people not spending money is not helpful for a growth economy. So you need to either cut down the park and put other things up that make money, or you need to close the doors and start charging to access the park. All of this I'm just telling you to say, of course you can say to people, live a life that's meaningful and focus on what's important to you. But when around them, the system is designed to make that park cost money, when the system is designed to cut down that tree because the tree doesn't make money, but if we cut it down and sell it as timber, it does make money. When everything around them is designed to grow and make more money, then they can look at you and say, I would love to, but they just took my park away. You know what I mean?
Who's they?
Well, it is a government that has been elected. To what extent what the government does is democratically motivated is a question. If we talk about the forces of lobbyism and the forces that want the economy to keep going in a certain way, it's the people who have the most money who want this because that's what their money is built on, that the economy keeps running the way it does. So I think the they is an important question. The they could be all of us. I mean, if more people realized that we need to start talking about who owns what and why, and that we need to start having a conversation about what fairness and justice and equality really mean, the they could soon be very different people. But right now, they are the ones that follow the growth logic. And that's in part why I'm making this film, to tell the story of two people who try to be they, or who try to make them behave differently. One of them was a member of the Italian government for a few months. The other one is trying to put a coalition of governments together, or she actually succeeded in putting a coalition of governments together who tell the world that GDP growth is no longer the answer. So, yeah, that's the important question. Who are they who make those choices, who make those decisions, and what can we do to make them change the way they decide these things?
Yes. And now, please answer that question. What can we do to make them change?
I'm not an expert. I think, so many people have worked so many years of their lives trying to change society, and I'm a fairly a newcomer to this thing. So I want to just express my caution at making prescriptions. I can just relate to what I've heard other people speak about and what seems straightforward to me. And this is that we need a different way of telling ourselves stories about the future. I think we need new stories about the future, because at the end of the day, people mold their lives according to the stories about the meaning of life that they tell each other. And right now, I mean, I grew up with this, you probably did too, with this idea that parents say to their children, you should have better lives than we did. My parents were born in 36 and 37. They had their childhood happen during World War II. So they were quite marked by that. And that's an understatement. So these people say to their children, me, I want you to have a better life than I did. Now, generations of people have been saying that, but better always meant that you have more. But we have to stop thinking better is having more at some point. But there's no institutionalized body that can say to people in a certain society, this is enough now. The third car, 2 of which weigh over 2 tons and have 400 horsepower each, plus 4 TV sets in your house, 2 apartments, and this and that, and the swimming pool is, if you keep adding to that, your kid is not going to have a better life than you have. Most likely their life will be worse for 2 reasons. One, they will need to take care of all of that stuff, and that's no longer having a good life. That's being a manager of property. And 2, if they keep living like that, we're going to run this earth into the ground. So we need a new definition of what having a better life means. And that we can only do through storytelling, because at the end of the day, by what we watch on Netflix, by what we hear on the news, by all of that, we shape our collective conscience of what meaning of life is. And right now, meaning of life is, I gotta, get up on that career ladder. I gotta outdo my neighbor. What's the family gonna say when they see that our car broke down again? Yeah, none of that matters. What the family should be concerned about is whether you have a blast of a time when you sit together and have a beer. That's what's important, not whether you show up in an old car. But still, we are telling ourselves the story that whether or not you show up in an old car or in an old suit, whether that matters. And we shouldn't tell us that story, so we need new stories. I'm not sure if I made sense. Did I make sense?
I think so. I watched a Netflix documentary yesterday that was recommended. I had a very similar conversation like this 2 days ago in the evening. I live in the Swiss mountains by now, not for any job reasons, because I do the same I do everywhere else as well. But it is quite pretty over here. And we have a hot tub in front of the house. So we were sitting in the night in the hot tub, clear sky, falling stars, big mountain range, and we had a discussion exactly about this. And they recommended this YouTube show to me. It's called Eat the Ground, and they are talking about degradation of soil. And what I liked a lot about this movie is it's not only visualizing a catastrophe that we are experiencing at the moment, they are also offering a solution. They say it, and they offer a solution to climate change, because they propose studies on how you can run your agricultural land with less chemistry, less technology, but grow better crops that also store CO2 to the ground. And if the whole world would change like this, we would have more food than before, which would be more healthy, there would be more animals around, and we could lower the amount of CO2 even if we kept putting out the same amount we are right now. And that for me I like it so much, because they offered a solution. They said it's not all fucked up. Well, it is at the moment, and we will keep fucking it up if we don't change anything. But here's something that we can do. And that's somehow the opposite that, well, you mentioned him at the beginning, the Trump administration did for 4 years. And I think if you give people a clear idea about how can you live your life, and making the world a better place at the same time, it's something positive.
Yeah,
For me, by the way, one aspect that helped me so much that was getting rid of excess stuff. I didn't realize it. I got rid of 90% of my possessions as a part of, well, I thought that would be cleaning my mind. And afterwards, it was the first time that I had an overview on all my possessions. And I realized I still don't need 90% of that stuff. And in the end, I ended up with very few clothes and only 2 bags, and I could go wherever I wanted. And that freed up my mind, because I didn't have to take care of so much stuff. I didn't have to pay for apartment, car, motorbike, whatsoever. That all of a sudden I started questioning my belief systems. And that's the moment when I thought, no, we can tell a different story. We can have a vision for the future. And I think it is possible. If you look back 30 years or 40 years, there was no Green Party. There was nothing about environment at all. And I think we are not even halfway there. But there was a shift possible. And I think we need these leaders, thinkers, and politicians who speak for a clear vision.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested. This is a weird thing to say, coming from a guy who's making a documentary film, but I'm not interested in most documentary films, because very many documentary films are just really majoring on describing a problem from all the angles. And I think, I'm not saying that those films are not needed. They're clearly needed, because these problems need to be described in ways that is accessible for people and so forth. But I'm not interested in making that kind of a film, at least not right now. I was interested in finding someone who said, this is the direction I'm going to walk in, and I'm going to try to solve something. This is where I'm going to go to do something different, to do something better. And that's why I am making the film that I'm making, because these two people that I followed for well, I mean, it's going on 3 years now. Most of the filming was done in 2018 and 2019, though. They have a sort of, I mean, it isn't a simple answer in the sense that it's simple to implement, but it's a simple answer to understand. And what they're saying is GDP growth, the growth of our gross domestic product, is a number that was useful for the war. For World War II, that's when it was really developed to plan an economy at war times. And then after the war, it became a symbol for progress. And that was probably fine for a bit, because making more things, particularly on a continent like Europe where so many things were destroyed, and showing in numbers that you made more things this year than last year, says that you're doing better.
Better again.
But the question is, for how long should you keep using that indicator? We have just kept using it without ever really questioning it. And these people are saying, let's start by switching to different indicators. And that changes everything. And they're basically saying, rather than measuring a proxy, which is what GDP growth is, we're saying, this is how well people are doing. The GDP doesn't tell us how well people are doing. It tells us how much a country is making and selling. And we're thinking that the number of how much a country is making and selling says something about how well people are doing. We assume that there is a connection. Well, it turns out there is no longer a connection. In many countries GDP keeps going up while people's happiness and lifestyle, happiness and well-being is going down or staying equal. So they're saying, why don't we start measuring what's really important to people? Rather than measuring this one number of the GDP, let's switch to a different set of indicators. And some countries are. I mean, Scotland is trying to. New Zealand is trying to. Iceland is trying to. Those are the 3 countries that got together to form the Wellbeing Economy Governments, is what they're called. And that's part of the story of our film. Italy has given itself a framework that's called benessere equo e sostenibile, which means, well-being, equal and sustainable. So it's a framework with which they try to evaluate every policy they put out, and they say every policy that we enact needs to be measured against that framework to show are people's lives really going to get better. Now, it's not as necessarily as powerful in practice as it sounds on paper, but there are movements like this. And moving away, so, if you tell people, and this is part of the learning I've gone through, if you tell people, let's move away from growth, they kind of look at you awkward and say, well, but...
where else?
But growth is a good thing, isn't it? I want to grow as a person. And then you start having a conversation about semantics and about what growth even means. So if you say to people, oh no, your happiness can grow, your health can grow, the lifespan of your children can grow, all of those things can grow, but let's no longer try to grow the output of the economy. That's a very specific thing to want to grow. Why don't we grow the well-being of our nation? Why don't we grow the well-being of nature and people at the same time? So, you have this discourse out there, the post-growth school of thought and the degrowth school of thought. It's wanting the right thing, but it's just very, and it talks about what you talk about, reducing your things, reduce to the max, if you like. But it talks a language that people don't find appealing, because some things can grow. Let happiness grow. Let that be our growth economy. Let health grow. Let the size of our forests grow. Costa Rica has managed to go from 20% of their land covered in forests to go up to 50% of their country covered in forests. Let forests grow. Let's be a growth society. Let's just stop thinking that the output of the economy measured in euros and cents needs to grow from last year to this year. Yeah. That is a very narrow concept of growth.
I had a picture or a metaphor in my mind when you were telling this, because I started raising some of my own food this year because I in fact was hit quite hard by the first wave of the pandemic, and I had to switch a lot to online business. And as I have my second business doing individual Africa tours, Sahara, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, well, there was not so much travel. I wanted to do something meaningful for myself, and I started raising animals. And I thought that I'm doing the best I can to give these animals the best life possible to produce good food. And I would say I did quite well. And now I'm at the point I could raise more. I could have them reproduce more. But why when I'm not hungry? There's no sense. I mean, okay, I could sell some, and there are some friends, they also want to have some good food, so they are buying some animals of mine. But if they are satisfied, and I'm satisfied, there's absolutely no sense in having more chicken. I mean, at the moment I have so many eggs, I can't eat them all. So there's no sense in having another 5 chicken.
Yeah.
And if you imagine that everybody was doing the same, so that there weren't other people being hungry, then you reach a point when more is just not better.
Exactly. More is not better. Yeah.
At that moment, you could say, now I want to focus on more health for the animals. I want to focus on more, well, maybe taste or more sustainability, stuff like this, but not the more animals.
Not more output. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, sorry.
So what do we do about it?
Well, I mean, talking about it is the first step, and I think people do understand that more economic output, strictly in terms of, making more stuff, can't be the answer. Most people understand it. If you ask people in the street, you'll probably hear most of them, if you say to them, look, economic growth, making more stuff next year than this year, is that the solution to our problems? Most people are smarter than that. They know if they talk to you that no, of course not. But we haven't made that a collective voice yet. We have to make that a chorus that rings out through society, a conversation that we all have. And, progress has been made in that respect. And part of it is due to the protagonists in my film. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, she told the world in a TED Talk in 2018, I think it was. It was last year. It was 2019. I'm getting my years mixed up. She told the world that Scotland, Iceland and New Zealand were now the well-being economy governments, and that GDP was not the first thing on their mind anymore, and that growing the GDP is not going to be the answer to the future. But or in Germany, for instance, in the big weekly newspaper Die Zeit, which you will probably know, they had, for I think 5 weeks, they had a series of articles talking about, do we still need more economic growth, and is that a good idea? And it's arriving in the mainstream, but it will only arrive in the mainstream if we also start voting for politicians or telling politicians to not be afraid to say it. I started making this film in early 2018 because I thought, that's incredible. In my country, in Germany, no politician who's on the public national stage will go out and say, yeah, we're not going to do economic growth anymore. The BIP, the Bruttoinlandsprodukt, our German GDP, it doesn't need to grow anymore. We're doing fine. Let's do something else. People would kill him. Journalists would slaughter them. And I thought in 2018, there's people who are trying this anyway. There's a guy who's going to be maybe a member of the Italian government who wrote books saying that the GDP growth is not a good thing. I have to find out about these people. But it's moving forward. It's moving slowly, but we have to have these conversations and start talking about what is it that needs to grow. And again, I think then we're on the same page. Simplicity and happiness need to grow. And us focusing on what's really important, and us focusing on, being a community of people who are on this tiny spaceship called Earth, traveling through infinity. And this is all we got. I mean, those few billionaires who might go to Mars, fuck them. We need to make this spaceship work for everyone, And that's a conversation we need to have. And that's why, essentially, I think that's my excuse for becoming a filmmaker. I have been struggling with this for a long time, but sometimes wondering whether I should use the skills I've developed in my former professional life in a different way. But again and again and again, I come back to realizing what's needed now is stories that talk about what can and must be different in a way that touches people emotionally, and that touches people on a level where they feel that a different way is possible. And I think I'm trying to start telling those stories now as a filmmaker, because I don't know what else to do. And also I want to make films.
Yeah, well, that's a good excuse. What is your now? Let's assume we have some listeners. Well, it's just a couple of hundreds of people listening to this podcast. But I have the feeling, I have the impression that people who are following me through all these years, they have a mindset which is going in the same direction. What do you have? One suggestion? What can we do in our life to shape the world, the society, the system for the better?
I think two things. One is we should all recognize and understand that the system has been designed by humans. We sometimes talk about the economy like it's a natural law governing it, of the invisible hand and all that stuff. No. Humans have been working with and living off all kinds of economic systems throughout mankind's history. Communal systems where some people in the village made the shoes and other people in the village made other things. And, the fact that we have designed the system we have today is not God-given, and it's not given by nature. It's been designed.
By us, yeah.
Yeah, the surface that we live on, the earth, the animals, the trees and the plants and all of that, that's been given to us by nature or by God. You can call it whichever way you're inclined. But that we need to protect with everything we have, because that doesn't come back when we destroy it. What we put on top of that, money, laws, interactions, all of that we shape every day. So it's malleable, it's changeable, it can be adapted, it can be something different. And people need to know this, because if you listen to the news, if you listen to the mainstream media, and I'm not, this is not a dig at journalists. Journalists are doing an important job, but they're most of the time not in the business of questioning the system. We now need to question the system because the system is no longer working. So the first step is realize that the system has been designed by us. I have a quote from my protagonist, Lorenzo Fioramonti. He said it incredibly well, and I can't say it better. He said, we can make it, we can unmake it, and make it again. That's what we have to know every day when we think, oh, this isn't working. Well, we made it so. And then the second thing is, and that's just as important, we need to realize that this is a political problem. And that's what I was writing to you, when we started planning this conversation. We need to, if I solve the problem of happiness and simplicity in my own life and then carry on happy, hopefully, I'm not solving the problem for the rest of the world. I'm not helping to be part of the solution. I am arguably still part of the problem because I've arranged myself within the system rather than rubbing against it. So the second thing is we have to rub against the system, and that can mean different things for different people. Write a blog post about how much growth you need in your life and in this world. figure out whether our monetary system really needs to grow and can't we have a different one. Ask your neighbor who's telling you how proud he is about the fat big US SUV he just bought, whether that is really a good idea. Some of these things are uncomfortable, and we have to learn to have these uncomfortable conversations, and they need to trickle through society, and they need to arrive at our politicians. Write a letter to your member of parliament. I don't know, shout at someone at a political party rally who says we need more economic growth. Shout back and say, for what? To destroy our planet? Just anything where this becomes part of the landscape. That's really what we need to do. And I think everyone should find their own way of doing it. As long as we remember that it needs to reverberate out into the world and not just be part of what you do in your own life. This needs to be a connected endeavor where people come together or communicate with one another, where it goes like ripples through the population and becomes a sound so loud that politics will hear it and say, people seem to want something else.
Martin, you summed up the mission behind my work.
Well, then you're a political man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, wonderful. I am political. I learned so long. If you're doing advisory, if you are being a mentor, there are certain things you don't talk about. One of them is politics. I do talk about politics because politics, once again, it's a system. It's created by us. And that one sentence you said, we can make it, we can unmake it, and we can make it again. This is what I'm telling people for their own life, for their job structure, for their relationship that they are in. It's decisions that you take. And the decisions. Now I swallowed up the decisions. The decisions that you take are forming the society and the culture around you. And as long as you vote for the people that you vote so far, it's not going to change. If you want to change, doing more of what you have done so far is going to lead to more what you already have. If you don't want that, be responsible for your own actions and go out and change it. And this is why I thought this is so interesting, because I never had the chance to talk in this podcast about the system, because so often I hear that I cannot change because of the system. Like it's some superpower that created that for us and it has always been like this. No, it has not. And if you are against that, create a vision what you are for. Seth Godin says often, do you know Seth Godin? Mm-hmm. Personally? Because no. the last person I asked that question said, yeah, I met him then and then. I was like, okay, well,
no, I've not met Seth Godin,
to the podcast. No. So he says tribes form against something, communities around something. And that's what I want to create, a key community that wants to step up for something.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I can be at any point of help for you, Martin, please come back to me anytime. When do you plan to finish your documentary?
So I'm currently working on the rough edit. I have an editing producer who helps me with it. It's a process. I have another video conference after this, and then I will go back to the editing, and it's just ongoing. I hope the plan was to be done with the rough edit by the end of the year. I think it's going to take a bit longer. And then we need post-production and we need to figure out distribution. I think it has to come out at some point next year. I'm not sure when and where. That's still being worked on. But it has to come out sometime next year. It's probably going to be the middle of the year with everything that still has to happen. But yeah, I can't wait myself to see it come out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward for that. And well, if there is if there's anything that you want me to write about, that you want me to publish, or where you want me to drop your name, let me know. I'd be happy if we maybe we have another conversation after your movie comes out, so that you maybe can give us some ideas about the reaction. What did people really think about it, and where do you see the struggles and where do you see the opportunities? Because as we both like to focus on a positive outcome.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it again. It'll be exciting to see what people think about the film, and
yes.
I'd be happy to hear what you think, so let's have that conversation then.
Perfect. Martin, then for now, I thank you very much for being my guest, and all the best for that documentary. I personally believe it's needed.
Thank you so much for having me and for your work.